Hello, everyone, and welcome to Two and a Half Asians, our very imminent podcast.
What? Go again.
Oh my God.
Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Two and a Half Asians podcast. Today we have a returning guest, Mr. Evans. Hello, Mr. Evans. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Raphael. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Yes. Okay, but it's great to have you back. Our topic or theme of the day will be: is healthcare a right or privilege? So, Alexander, what do you think?
Oh, yes. I personally would edge on privilege. However, a lot of arguments going for universal healthcare are pretty convincing. What about you, Alistair?
I totally believe that healthcare should be a privilege, not a right. However, I do know that Matthew here would disagree, since he's from where he's from. It's common for the citizen to enjoy a cheap healthcare that is universal.
Almost free, actually.
Yeah, almost free.
How about you, Mr. Evans? What are your views on this before I discuss my views that Alistair seems to know so well? Yes.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm sure Alistair is aware that I probably lean more towards universal healthcare as well. Being Australian, where we have quite a comprehensive Medicare system, although that has been eroded quite substantially in recent years. I still feel that that's, it's part of the social compact, that we look after each other. And I think when you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I think Article 25 it is, you'll see that healthcare is in there as one of the sort of human rights. And so obviously governments interpret that, in their own way, and they provide varying levels of care accordingly. But for me, I think it's tax dollars, if they're going to go anywhere, healthcare is a pretty good place for them to go. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Evans here. I think healthcare should be universally a right to every person, because as Mr. Evans so well
No matter
said,
the gender.
Are you?
Well, I'm asking.
Yes, no matter the gender.
But
Anyways, let's
All
cut
right.
that out.
Okay.
Jesus,
First,
dude.
we have to define healthcare. I think.
First, we have to define gender. Let's go down this way.
Dude, I wasn't gonna cut it until that.
Okay, let's define healthcare.
Okay. First of all, to argue this, I think we would have to define what healthcare would be, and a definition of.
Do you want me to give you a textbook definition of healthcare from Google?
I was thinking more in terms of plans and what types of coverage people should receive as a right rather than a privilege.
Sure.
But what would you guys think?
nothing. You pay for it.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Alistair over here is quite strong in his position that no coverage should be given without adequate pricing, and if you don't pay for anything, then you wouldn't receive any, which is, I wouldn't say a reasonable view, but it is a view, I suppose.
But also you have to remember that Alistair lives a very privileged lifestyle, so he doesn't know what true pain is. And there are many people in the world who are not as fortunate as he is.
That's why I think universal basic income should be given to those people, and if they want to spend on healthcare, then they should. If they don't want to, then they should.
But universal basic income is not always given to these people.
That's why I.
Yes, but you can think that, but it's not going to happen, Alistair. Alistair.
Hypothetically, if it were to happen.
No, not.
I'm sorry. I thought we were having a.
No, we're not. We're not. No, we're not.
Theoretical.
No, we're not. We're not.
Discourse.
No, we're
but
just.
obviously, you're living in a different planet.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So the universal basic income idea is an interesting one, but I think the challenge is that when we look at healthcare systems that are user pays, predominantly user pays, for the US, for example, you cannot deny that the amount of healthcare spending per individual is just off the charts compared to many other countries for outcomes that are either the same or worse than in those other countries. And I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that the profit motive exists at every single level of the healthcare system. Whereas when you've got more government involvement at the end user, i.e. the patient level, that profit motive is no longer there. And so even though you might have pharmaceutical companies, seeking their share of profits, you might have hospital operators seeking their share of profits, you might have doctors as private contractors seeking their share of profits, at the end user level, it means that it's actually affordable for the bulk of the population. When you have purely sort of end user pays processes, well then, again, the hospitals, the doctors, if they're private contractors, to that hospital, they're seeking profit. And so as a result, prices are going to be much, much, much higher for the end user. And when you look at who are the biggest users of healthcare systems, you'll find that actually it's not normally the poor, it's actually the wealthy are the largest users of the healthcare system. So in saying that, tax dollars that are paid by the wealthy are a transference to the poor through the health system, it may not necessarily be as large as what we might think.
But wouldn't if you just took government out of the equation, that the prices would will decrease, or
no? How they decrease? Any way they can decrease is if governments intervene through things like price floor or direct provision. Sorry, price ceilings or direct provision.
But wouldn't they try to take it? Wouldn't they want to offer healthcare companies to the domain of people that's not the wealthy? So they will try to make the price more affordable.
Who's going to try and make the price more affordable?
I'm asking, won't the companies, the healthcare companies, whoever's
what incentive do they have to do that? That's what I'm asking. So why
if they simply don't, then the price is simply, without any help from the government, the price is simply too high, isn't it? For those who aren't wealthy.
The price is incredibly high. Yeah, that's right.
So if they can't afford it, they're not taking advantage of that demand.
I'm not sure I follow your argument there, Alistair.
So I think his argument is kind of like, since insurance is paying the actual bill,
mm-hmm.
and most of the less wealthy are covered by that insurance, or say government.
There are significant numbers of numbers of people in the US who do not have health insurance, or certainly do not have adequate health insurance to be able to access basic health services. So again, in the most free market health system in the world, that doesn't seem to be an outcome that's there.
Can we go back to the idea of basic and, let's say, not basic health
mm-hmm.
Services? What would you define as basic and basically a right for people to have in terms of healthcare?
Yeah, so if I have an illness that I am unsure of how to treat, that I know is going to cause me discomfort for at least a day, I should be able to go to the GP, the general practitioner, and seek some form of treatment for that. And yeah, I think that's a fairly basic level of care that can and should be provided.
Then what should be?
In terms of things that shouldn't be provided, I would think that non-essential cosmetic surgery and things like that, the things that you would regard as elective, things that don't necessarily compromise your health and well-being. Fair enough, you have a user-pay system, but for those things that are directly compromising your health and well-being, then I would think that's pretty essential.
Would you think cancer treatment would be a necessity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What if this was lung cancer and was purely caused by themselves through excessive smoking?
I'll get a little bit personal here. So my father passed away from cancer of the esophagus. The risk factors attached to that are smoking and drinking, both of which my father undertook quite extensively, I suppose. So an argument could be made that he contributed to his own demise through his activities, but to the extent that the link is 100%, it's not there, and to the extent that we shouldn't try and cure somebody of their ailment. it should happen. It's just a basic right.
So your perspective on the issue in terms of what is a basic right is whatever that a human being needs to survive.
Whatever compromises their health and well-being. Yeah. I mean, again, things that are purely cosmetic in nature and are not going to impact upon your health. Fair enough. You have a user-based system. No
I
problem.
think we can all agree on that.
But if you're being negatively impacted, your daily life is being impacted because of your health. Yeah, I think you should be able to seek treatment without sort of fear of failure.
How big of a positive impact do you think a universal healthcare system for, let's say, that covers all of what you would define as your basic rights to healthcare, so necessities and what would impair you in terms of your everyday living? So if that coverage was given out as a right, what do you think the positive economic impacts of that would be?
Oh, I think you suffer far fewer days off work. I think you enable people to be more productive than what they would be otherwise. I mean, if you've got someone who is underinsured, for example, and so they can't seek immediate treatment for their ailment, then that person may need to have more days off than someone who's able to go to the doctor immediately and seek relief straight away. So I think obviously you multiply that, across the whole economy, there's benefits there. I think there's a lot to be said for peace of mind in knowing that you have access to healthcare, and the stress that is really it's just not there because you're worrying about if you do fall ill or if you do injure yourself in some way. I think if you're an uninsured or an underinsured person in the US, you must be constantly fretting about falling ill and whatnot, because presumably if you don't have healthcare, you're not going to have income protection insurance either. You're unlikely to have significant savings, to cover days off work. Probably, if your employer isn't providing healthcare for you, they're unlikely to provide, paid leave and things like that, due to medical expenses and whatnot. So you're probably under significant economic pressure to go into work even if you are feeling, really, really unwell, which is not there if you have a universal healthcare system, because you can seek relief very, very quickly.
If a guy, let's call him Raphael, crosses the street and gets hit by a car because he crossed the street while it was turning red, right? Why should people pay for his bill? Or why should the citizens of that same country, let's call it, I don't know, some European country, but why should I, let's say I'm a citizen, why should I pay for his bill?
Well, I suppose in the sense that if you can guarantee that over the entire course of your lifetime you will never do anything stupid to cause yourself injury, if you can provide that guarantee, and so therefore you never ever require any form of assistance yourself, if you can provide a guarantee that over the if you can provide a guarantee that over the course of your lifetime you'll never ever require any form of social assistance whatsoever, then maybe yes, you have an argument. But I don't know.
What do you mean by social assistance?
Well, like through healthcare, welfare, or whatever. So that you always have sufficient income and savings, etc., to fund all of your activities over the course of your entire life, and you can guarantee that every member of society has exactly the same resources to be able to do the same. Then sure. But the simple fact is we don't have a society where everybody has the ability to fund all of their activities over the course of their life, and people do silly, crazy things all the time. Now, you mentioned the notion of a red light. Are you talking about, so Raphael's walking, this mythical person, Raphael, is crossing the street on,
Mythical, yes.
he's crossing the street on like at a pedestrian crossing, and the pedestrian light is right there.
He crossed the street and he got injured, let's say, by a car, and he needs to be treated.
Yep. So do we know, was the car,
presuming that
was a car 300 meters away and then just failed to stop, even though he saw Raphael crossing the street?
Let's assume that it's his fault.
Let's assume that it's his fault.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's if it's his fault, it's his fault.
So why we should pay for it? Why should we pay for it?
Because it's part of the social compact. I think as a society, we
have a duty for others
to look out for others. Yeah, I think so.
It's
But
not always
should
so
this-
individualistic as it should be.
I think so.
should this duty be enforced by gunpoint, basically, as in through through governments, basically saying you have to pay this, you have to help, let's say, individuals who cost their own lives in some sort of way. In this case, our mythical being Raphael.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think governments should have a right to basically say, give us the money to help people that you might not personally want to help, or go to prison?
Yeah, but it's not always helping the people you
Well-
don't want to help. It's also that's in what
Yes, but it
minority
is
of the cases.
Yeah,
still
I mean-
it is part of the case.
But
And
you're also
if-
helping
Yeah, I mean,
the thousands of other people who actually need the help.
Yeah, and again, it's just part of the social construct, the social fabric of society.
circle.
You know, I mean,
But he made a choice, right? It's not like if he made the choice, then why should he live with the consequences?
Look,
well, he does live with the consequences because he lives with injuries.
No,
that
but
he's
why
got
should someone bail him out?
no one's bailing him out.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
So
you want-
the
Alistair.
citizens of the country is bailing him out.
They are bailing him out, by the way.
Like I said.
You said is.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay.
They are bailing him out.
Well, again, in the it's called being human, right?
Yes, but not everyone is human.
Well, no, no. I mean, everyone is human, so people are going to make mistakes. People are going to do things
Yeah,
that
but
aren't necessarily, in their own self-interest at times. And as a society, we have a degree of
I mean-
forgiveness towards
But
that.
what I
So-
meant,
so-
what I meant to Mr. Evans was when I said not every human is now the society is becoming more and more self-centered and egotistical. So there's less people who are out there watching for others.
Mm-hmm.
So now, for example, Alistair, I don't want to point any fingers, but Alistair is quite egotistical at times. He can be sometimes, but the thing is, people may think he is quite egotistical and selfish and self-centered. But the thing is, there are way more people out there that are significantly worse than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And now the problem is no one's thinking like you, Mr. Evans. No one's as compassionate and caring as you. They don't want to look out for
Please give
others.
me a 7, sir.
He doesn't teach me. But yes, that's what I meant. Because not everyone, most people will want to keep their resources to themselves.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that. I think that when you look at, with the exception of the United States, and you look at the other developed economies around the world, almost all of them have
Is
got...
France in it?
Yes, France is in it.
Just making sure.
Yes.
I wasn't sure.
I
if they
think
were
France
developed or
is
not.
in it.
Yes.
I think France is
So
in
when you look at it, almost all other developed economies, with the exception of the United States, they all take the view that healthcare is a basic human right, and so they've all got some sense of universal healthcare system available. And you look at the United Kingdom, for example, they take great pride in the fact that they have a universal healthcare system, and one of the things that annoys them greatly at the moment, and one of the factors that was a big part of the Brexit debate, for example, was declining standards in the NHS that was being blamed on essentially overuse by non-immigrant Europeans. So I disagree with the idea that most people don't have a sense of compassion towards their fellow countrymen. I think that actually most people do. I think, but the social structure in the United States tends to be a bit different in that it is much more about sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's much more aspirational in the sense that you need to use your own resources to get your own way in life.
But
And so
what?
in that sense, the US view healthcare as a privilege, more so than a right.
But with the U.S. political climate, let's say, a lot of people in the U.S. are for open borders and for less border control, especially with Donald Trump's rhetoric saying, "Oh, build the wall." Everyone's
Beautiful
going
wall.
against that, and saying, actually, America should be inclusive and we should welcome
Sure.
even illegal immigrants.
Mhm.
But how would this be feasible in conjunction with the universal healthcare system? Because shouldn't the healthcare system just fall apart under the stress? And plus, wouldn't that be a bigger incentive for, in this case, let's say, illegal immigrants to just flood into the country? So wouldn't you say that it's only a one-way deal, pretty much? You either have strong borders and a good universal healthcare system or a welfare system, or you can have none of those. because with a weak border and a strong healthcare system, it would just be an overflooding of immigrants and all that.
Which is why Canada's overrun with Americans, right? Because they're all running out there to go and get their free healthcare up in Canada, right? So no, I mean, I again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that either, in the sense that when you look at the impact of immigration on most economies, it's generally positive, you know, and so immigration, you know, will ultimately boost GDP, which actually provides more resources available to spend on things like healthcare. Again, the issue for the United States is simply that the level of spending required per person to achieve equivalent health outcomes is double or more most other developed economies. And a big part of that, for me, is simply that the profit motive exists at every single level of the healthcare system, particularly at the end user's, you know, stage. You know, the pharmaceutical companies, you know, are a big driver of this as well, and being able to rein in costs attached to pharmaceutical products is a big challenge for the US.
So,
yeah, but other developed economies who have got similar sort of GDP per capita levels have been able to provide a universal healthcare system. So it is feasible. It just depends on where the priorities lie in that particular society.
would you say that pharmaceutical companies should be blamed?
No, I don't know. I don't think it's a systemic issue. I think, you know, it's hard to blame the company for trying to maximize its profits. That's what they're there to do.
But with the pharmaceutical side, a lot of it is at the cost of a lot of American citizens. So say the opioid crisis, it was developed because pharmaceutical companies pay doctors basically to say, oh, you got a headache? Well, here's some opioids. And yeah, that just spread like wildfire across the country, and now it's a complete epidemic. And it's one that I think the US healthcare system cannot actually sustain.
Which is, again, why you're talking about a systemic concern, because those sort of activities are far less prevalent in other countries around the world. And, you know, if you were to, you know, remove the incentives for doctors to accept such payments, if you were to subsidise, you know, healthcare at point of provision, then, you know, the doctors essentially face a price cap, you know, on what they're able to charge, you know, for given services, etc. Which means that they need to make choices, you know, about what they're going to provide. Yeah.
So why can't I get like glasses for free?
Sorry?
Why can't I get like a pair of glasses for free?
In Australia, you can get a pair of glasses highly subsidised.
So glasses, hearing aid,
Yep.
I get a haircut for free?
You can't get a haircut. The haircut's not healthcare.
Why not haircut?
It's not healthcare.
How is that?
But
in
what
any
if,
way
what if it
healthcare?
gets too long and then I can't see the car coming down the street and it kills me?
It's still not healthcare.
It's
You-
not-
you
This is
can-
ridiculous.
What about braces? Braces for free?
Braces, orthodontic treatments are often not subsidised unless there is.
No, I'm going to jump on this train.
Yeah.
How about? Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Sorry, I mean, unless there is some significant sort of deformity within your mouth, that then orthodontic treatments are not normally, because generally it's cosmetic. You know, it's not going to impact upon your health.
What about pen and paper for school?
You know, what about clothing, for
Yeah,
example?
clothing, computer. What
Because if you don't have clothes, you'll catch a cold.
Exactly.
You could die.
Exactly.
What about clothing? Are they going to give that to
Exactly.
you for free?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And shoes.
Should
If you walk around barefoot in
question?
the puddles and all that, you'll get trench foot or something.
Yeah.
All shoes. They'll give you
Yeah.
shoes for free, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Should
So,
they give you free?
so I think with respect to things like that, you know, typically people, if they are that poor that they can't afford clothing, etc., there will be some form of welfare payment available, and the vast majority of people in society have a sense of decency that demands that they wear some form of clothing out and about. So they will spend at least some of their welfare payment on clothing. It will often be sort of second-hand clothing, so in that sense it is subsidised because they're not going to go and buy, you know, new clothing. They'll go to a charity store. You know, maybe the local church, for example, might distribute, you know, free clothing to to the homeless, etc. So there are avenues for people to gain access to, essentials like clothing at low or no cost. Yeah.
So you said.
But they're not going to go and buy the latest Gucci handbag or anything like
Yes.
this.
So the moral, motivation behind giving universal health is that people should be compassionate and care for their fellow citizens, right?
And
Sure.
anything compromising to their everyday lives.
Yeah,
would
do it,
be-
and
Right.
you
So
don't want to do it.
if that is the premise, then why should the government force that?
Since when did we say?
Also,
Yeah,
if
because
if
if
the
it's-
government doesn't force that, then we will all have
sure. So, I mean,
So
so
instead-
that
instead
then comes
of-
down to the question of what is the purpose of government? Why are they there?
to force donations.
No, not to
Quote,
force donations,
unquote.
but legitimately, what is the purpose of government? It is to represent the will of the people, and if society is a compassionate society, well then they should be spending whatever funds they have available on, well not whatever, but some of the funds that they have available on compassionate ideals.
Then why should,
What if
I would-
society-
I would-
why
I would-
should,
I would-
why should, why should, what's the difference between that and a system based on charity and donation? If the argument is that every human is good enough to do this for their fellow man, then wouldn't a hypothetical scenario where you have a charity and everyone would donate?
We could have, instead of taxes, we have charity
Donations.
Yeah,
days.
sure. Sure, and so again, it comes down to the question of what is the role of government. If you don't believe that there should be any government,
Not
okay,
that,
then
but I don't think why should they have a right to
for the same reason
justify
that they have a right to do anything, right? They're there to represent. If you're going to give them money, they have to make a choice about what they're going to spend their money on, right? And whether that be roads, whether that be defence, whether that be healthcare, whether that be education, the government has to have, some choice over what they're going to spend your tax dollars on. And some governments will choose to spend significant amounts of money on healthcare. They think that's a worthwhile endeavour to, sustain the well-being of the population. Others may not. Others may have greater priorities like defence.
Well, talking about this choice of government spending, Alistair's point of view that he showed me before this podcast was that instead of universal health care, we should have a substantial, maybe not substantial, but a good amount for universal basic income. And that would be able to replace basically most of the welfare system, most if not all, I think. And you would take the money from all the welfare systems and spend it instead on distributing universal basic income of an adequate amount, predetermined and maybe updated yearly to adjust for inflation and prices and all that. And so that the less wealthy are able to manage their own wealth in terms of what they actually need. So maybe a poor person who requires one type of welfare, and basically he would be able to choose what type of cause, like either healthcare or like home or food and clothes. He would be able to choose for himself which way to go down. And instead of that badly explained, but
Yeah, so the challenge with that is still that in that sort of system you have at the end user point, there's a profit motive that exists. And so even with a universal basic income, you're still liable to get smashed pretty hard by an unexpected treatment cost. If you've got a universal basic income and you do suffer the misfortune of getting cancer, for example, your universal basic income is not going to cover the cost of that cancer, not by a long way. So,
or what about some kind of a loan in terms of their future basic income?
so then you penalise generations for the illness of someone today.
No, you penalize
I mean,
themselves.
Well, no, because if
But
it's a
then
loan,
you're-
if it's a loan or whatever, then presumably the estate would need to repay upon death.
but you're also
assuming-
penalizing them for something they have no control or little control over.
Right.
So if I walk across,
But the good side is that I'm not paying for it. Right? that is a good
I
start.
Yeah,
guess.
fair enough. So then I would suggest you go and find a little island somewhere where you can go and live, where you can build all of your own roads, you can build all of your own ports, you can build all of your own airports, you can build all of your own hospitals and facilities. So that way you can pay.
You say that with irony, but that is actually my dream.
I look forward to.
for the individual.
I look forward to reading about the Kingdom of Alistair on Wikipedia as a micronation at some point in the future. But I mean, I guess what in saying that all in jest, if the suggestion is that we all need to pay, full cost for everything that we use in society, then I think that's quite an unreasonable and unsustainable expectation. There are many things that are highly subsidised by governments that we take advantage of. And it's not just healthcare.
I just don't see the moral imperative to pay for someone else's bills.
So what should governments be there for? What is the role of government? What do they do?
What's the role of government?
Yeah.
To ensure the protection of its citizens.
And
That's
surely
one of
healthcare,
the, yeah.
and healthcare is part of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not only defense.
I don't think so.
But again, and that's perfectly fine. As I said, every society takes.
I don't see
their own
how
view.
a person should have a right to a product, a good or a service.
What? Depends on what kind of service. Then.
But
I don't.
Do you
I
think,
don't-
do you
the
think,
service
people
is
deserve
essential.
education?
So I'm curious how much you paid to walk along the road this morning when you came to school.
Oh, I didn't walk to school. I actually got a car.
Okay, so how much did
No,
You
you
speak
the
so,
roads
like
club.
such an obnoxious little rich boy.
Okay, but you took a car, right? Did you pay the full cost of the
stretch of road.
the road wear and tear, the environmental considerations attached to using that car?
Yes, it's called tax.
What tax did you pay?
Me, I paid
You don't pay taxes, Alistair. You're not 18 yet.
yeah.
You're not
What?
18.
Yeah.
I know when's your birthday, Alistair. You're not 18.
October 28.
It's not October 28th right now. Is it?
It's been 18 years right now.
What is he talking about?
It has what?
Any that doesn't matter.
You're not 18 years old.
You're not paying.
You're not paying any taxes.
Okay, but let's say I am. Let's say I am 19.
In almost every activity in life, we are subsidised to some extent in some way. That our taxes.
Yeah, but I don't think
we do not pay our own way in everything that we do. There are things that we're subsidised by.
Yeah,
And
but
so we have to
those
make
are
choices.
public goods.
Sorry.
Those are public goods, right? It's, the sidewalk, the traffic line, all those are public.
No.
Okay, so why- do you
they're not
agree with
goods.
public
Well, it's-
schools?
Sorry, yes, they are public goods, but they are public goods that are provided by government. They don't have to be. Government's made a choice to provide them, and so.
It's obviously
So-
paid for
so-
the public
No,
good.
okay,
You have to
but-
pay
Yeah,
tax
yeah.
for the public good.
But again, the government's made a choice to use your tax dollars to provide that item. They don't have to. They can spend their money in other areas.
Yeah, but
and so it comes down to again, what is the social what is the social sort of compact between the citizens and the government, and in
But how's
societies.
that the same thing as healthcare?
Well, because in societies like France, the UK, Australia, the social compact is that we look out for each other and that we provide for those that are less fortunate than ourselves.
Should try
It's
that
just
out
part of,
someday.
it's part of the
Yeah.
social compact.
It's a good,
And
good measure.
in the US, there's a different social compact, and that's
I think,
okay.
I
It's-
think you'll
it's
fit very well
individual
in the
societies,
US, Alistair.
you know. That's all.
Okay, so do you think that public schooling should be available?
No.
Shut up.
I think the public school should be available, but not the ones that they have right now.
At a subsidized price, or free, or at full price, or how you would usually pay for this, let's say,
Public school.
a primary teaching.
Yeah.
I think it should be not subsidized.
A complete.
So, full fare.
because then,
Full fare?
yeah,
Is that what you mean?
Full fare.
like the entire price of what you would usually pay for a primary education.
Or the market would then will set the price for the.
But what if the price is too high for
They simply won't go.
generations on generations of a certain
Then
family?
you know how
Then
that
what's the
can
point of
screw.
having?
But you know how that
what's the point of
can.
having a company that will set the same price for years and years, and without having any people attending the school?
The thing
Which
is,
why you've often provided by government.
yes. The
What?
thing is,
to
the
ensure
schooling
that there's-
companies and the healthcare companies, they're not gonna say, our aim is to serve every person, right? This is basic economics, right, Mr. Evans?
Mhm.
There's an equilibrium of supply and demand, right? And at that equilibrium, there's a section of people who have the demand but don't have the money to pay for it.
I think the market should determine if. I mean, I think it's logical that they would determine a fair price for. I mean, at least if I was
It would be
if I was the owner, let's say, I think it's only logical to me to set a price that will ensure that.
Sure.
It
But-
would be if
No, I get what Alice is saying, but he's appealing then to those who have got the adequate resources to go to a private school. That's not what Alistair was asking. Sorry, that's not what Alice was asking. Alice was asking, should there be a public school system? Because a public school system is one where the government will either be heavily subsidising or providing fully for.
Well, maybe there should be a subsidized, but maybe only for basic utility. So let's say reading. For reading, basic, not the stuff that we learn today, which is utterly
Yeah, no, I do agree with Alistair on that. for once.
useless. But
No, it's yeah. I think honestly, if you want your child to be able to survive, let's say you aspire to become a baker when you're older,
Mhm.
you only need to do school until year 6 or the end of primary because you need to know how to read, write, maybe some basic forms of mathematics,
finance.
Yeah. Like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know, and then you can go and maybe learn a little bit on finance.
Maybe
I,
specialize.
I'm glad that you had your career choice worked out at 5 years old. That's one.
Yes, but some people are just born to be.
No,
becoming
not the
bakers.
career, choice, but the
So how does a parent, when they're first sending their child to school at 5 years old, know the
No,
capabilities and the
Yeah,
No,
capacity
but no,
and
you
the
don't-
career
you
path?
make a
No,
choice.
I'm not saying that.
You make
But
a
I'm saying like
choice.
I'm saying
then
there
you're-
should be not there should not be additional cost to my kids learning something that I know they will never learn again, or that they will
the
never.
social benefit
they'll
of
never use
having
again.
public school,
Yeah, for
schooling
example,
is
who needs to know
the
what
social-
dydx is in mathematics, dydx calculus, all that.
Unless you're a
not necessary.
mathematician.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're not
why
many
should-
of
why
us
should
want
Okay,
to become.
so why might you need to know differentiation even though you may not go into engineering or some other sort of field that requires said knowledge? If you take the view that mathematics isn't about necessarily the operations, but it's about the logic and reasoning that underpins mathematics, and being able to teach kids how to reason out a problem on a given set of assumptions, then that's probably a pretty valuable skill to have, regardless of whether it's in the context of differentiation or some other means.
Okay, let's take it back to healthcare. So you guys both agree that in public schooling, a full education might not be available, right? Which I disagree with, but
Well, I don't agree. I know. Yeah, I mean, I was.
but a certain like the necessities that you require, such as reading, taxes, you said, and these basically essential skills that you need to survive in our societies would still be provided by the state, right, or the government. Would you agree with that?
He said let's put it back to healthcare.
Yeah, but would you agree with that?
I mean,
Which is what you
let's
just
say-
said.
Let's just say yes.
So if you agree that these necessities to survive in our current society are to be provided to you by the state, wouldn't that logic also transfer over to healthcare, in which the necessities which you need to survive, or basically cannot be negatively impacted in your living in society, also be provided by the state? So how would
Because but you want to bring it back to healthcare. I'm just gonna talk about
yeah, this is healthcare. Because your logic in public schooling is what you need, necessities for.
Is it
I
healthcare?
don't
Yeah.
think the public school should be subsidized. Well, like I don't think the public school. I think the public school should be privatized in terms of the market setting the price, and I do believe the market will make it a cheaper,
But the
a
market
fair,
will
a fair price.
it
that-
will always leave people behind, which is the issue. And when it comes to something as significant as
Look, if you
healthcare,
think these people by going to school that they're magically not left behind, abdicate out, then
They definitely have a bigger chance of not being left behind than when they had no schooling at all and no opportunity. A child.
I think those who are not as fortunate should be granted a universal basic income, and I think that's the maximum responsibility that we should give to the poor. But in terms of the private school and in terms of the healthcare, I think that's. I don't see how we should deserve a.
So I'm curious then on your views on defence, for example.
I think we should.
Did the same attitude? Sorry, does the same attitude exist?
No, I think when it
towards
comes to defense, we should have as much nukes as possible.
As many.
As,
This is education failing our young here.
I'm sorry, that's not my
As
first
our
time.
youth.
It's not my,
same thing.
it's not my-
All right. Oh, okay. Well, we've had a long and illustrious conversation today. We're running out of time, and thank you, Mr. Evans, for coming back. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully you'll be back soon in the future.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alistair. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yes, it is.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
See
you all for
next
listening.
time.
Bye bye.